Hello everyone, my name's Tomo. I'm here with Verstappen.com Racing at Team Redline's brand new facility.
Max is so good as he is right now because it's a born natural gift with millions of hours of training. Team of the Year award in Esports from the Sport Awards was a big event. Well, this is the sim room. This is where the real magic happens.
Okay, that was close.
During an F1 weekend, in his motorhome, making a setup for other guys.
Atze, thank you so much for inviting us to this incredible space, mate. You must be so proud of what you've built here. It's amazing.
We are incredibly proud. It's amazing. Having an office like this is a dream. Been working really hard for it. And over the past 2 years, I think we started with a plan. And now it's finally close to finished. It's pretty much there right now. So
it's amazing. It's so cool. But like for anyone watching who doesn't know Team Redline and what you do, can just the base level in terms of what your responsibility is with Team Redline and who Team Redline are.
Team Redline is our sim racing esports team. I'm director, and my daily job within Team Redline is making sure that everything day to day is ready to perform. I think our main aim, our main goal is to win everything we enter. And this is what we take very serious. And it's now a team that hopefully wins a lot in the future as well, with a shiny office and in a very nice esports world that is getting bigger and bigger. So we are ready for the future.
That's the thing. It's grown so much, since I used to dabble a little bit, 10 or so years ago, and even in that period, the whole industry has grown so much. And the fact that you can have a space like this is amazing. But outside of Team Redline, what else do you do? Because you're a multifaceted individual. I know you've got a lot going on.
It has been a busy couple of years. And where I come from, professional speed skating, short track speed skating, I went to sim racing over the years, and I got really good at it at some point as well, because I was furiously training every day to achieve a goal, which was winning. And I think someone challenged me in the beginning of my career, my sim racing career, to beat the current leaders at that time, and they said it's impossible to beat them. So I went flat out, and that's how I got into sim racing. I learned everything about it. I learned everything about reading data, telemetry, learning from my teammates, finding the better teams, and that's how I ended up in Team Redline over the years. But next to that, I'm running a company, Adrenaline Control, where we train professional racing drivers, mainly in feeder series, to prepare for the race weekends using professional simulation. And this is going very much into detail, but of course, like the racing world it is right now, simulation is becoming a very important tool for drivers to prepare with the team, with their engineers, but also for their driving style. And these things you can address in the sim. And this is what we do, very specifically with Adrenaline Control. And next to that, I'm a driver performance consultant on the F1 tracks with Alfa Romeo the whole season. So I'm traveling a lot, multitasking, but the whole combination of everything is amazing.
Currently, the racing itself isn't what you do typically day to day, but when it started, when you did jump into sim racing, what was your kind of proudest moment that you had as a competitor in terms of behind the wheel from a sim racing point of view?
I think last year was a good example where we did the virtual Le Mans. We had a lot of eyes focused on us because I drove in the team with Max. But basically what we see is what we work for is the result, but the whole road to that result is building a setup, doing hundreds of laps, putting hours in. But the way we work together, we found an extra level, a next level of in sim racing, where we built a setup that was out of this world competitive, and our pace was just unbelievable. And I think even though we didn't finish that race, unfortunately, that race was the perfect storm of um, working together with the setup in the team. So it was not only Max, but we were a team of 4, but working together and pushing the maximum out of a situation. And we've been working like until 2, 3 a.m. sometimes to work on a qualifying setup or on a race setup and doing stints and then putting 2 hours of practice in to test something that might not even work. You know, it's a lot of time investment, and you have to be a little bit crazy to do it. But to see how quick we were as a team, so we won that race, the GTE class, but also we won the LMP class with our teammates. So we had 2 LMP teams, and we crashed out, unfortunately. But the other team, we were so quick as a team that the other one dominated as well. So
I think it's that obsession to the craft and the hours you put in.
Yeah.
That's what's necessary to kind of get to where you are at the moment.
Yeah, it's something. It's very hard to train. Like it needs to be part of your nature, I think.
You need to want to do it.
Yeah, but you don't even need to want it. You need to just do it. Like there needs to be an inner urge to do laps and
because that's the unseen stuff. That's the stuff that happens behind the scenes. No one's going to give you plaudits for that, but you know you have to be disciplined, I guess, to do that.
Discipline,
you know it's needed.
Crazy, whatever you want to call it. But it's fun, you know. It's working for that 1/10 over a 3.5 minute lap, and if you find that 1/10, it's a massive win for us. And just to search for these things based on things that you actually do in real life with the car as well. It makes it good practice. It creates team bonding. But yeah, not every driver has this mentality. Max and I connect really well because we think exactly the same. Max grew up in karting. He has his own education towards racing, but what Max is about is you don't have to tell him to work hard because it's his nature. Like he will push as hard as he can to make sure that he gets the maximum out of the car. And no one has to tell him anything. And for me, it's the same. If I sign up for a competition, I am in the sim until midnight at least to make sure that it's not me failing. I need to have maximum practice in. And that's what we look for in Team Redline in general, of course, with the drivers.
How do you set up a car for multiple drivers when every individual driver has their own slight nuances? You're not all, carbon copies of each other. So do you optimize the car for your quickest driver, say in qualifying, or do you make more of a compromise for something that works for everyone equally?
Yeah, well, taking Le Mans as an example again, of course, quali, you need a different setup than for the race. Quali, you drive low fuel, the car is light, and it only needs to perform for 1 lap. That's that flying lap where it matters. So whoever's doing qualifying will work on that qualifying setup, and if the race setup, which is the most important because the race is 24 hours, if that's finished, we base the qualifying setup and we try different ways to do it. But yeah, of course, we pick the driver who's doing qualifying, needs to be comfortable with doing qualifying. Qualifying is not about driving 1 quick lap, it's handling the pressure. And even Le Mans at some point, I think it was live broadcasted on TV with millions of viewers. And that's where you need to put that 1 lap down. And for sim races, this is kind of new. It's getting bigger and bigger, and there's more spectators. But this level of crowd was completely different compared to normal races. And you need to put the right guy in the right position. But to make a race setup where everyone is comfortable with, you can handle it 2 ways. Max and I can build a setup together where we feel like, this is it. This is where we find that extra 10th per lap. And if others are not comfortable with it, there's either we change the setup towards their liking and find a compromise between all 4, or we change the driver. We look into data. What are you doing differently? Why is the car responding differently to you than to Max, for example? And this is like a constant search, but we have unlimited practice. We have an engineer full-time on it who's working with the drivers. We have plenty of time to figure it out. So for us, and for me as a team director, if we don't figure it out after 1 month of preparation, we have done something wrong. So the baseline is figure this out. No matter how we do it, we need to have a compromise. Either we look into the driver or in the setup. It doesn't matter as long as we have everyone comfortable for 24 hours in that race, and we end as high as possible, winning.
Because obviously with your experience working for a real F1 team, Alfa Romeo, with Max working with Red Bull Racing, and you working together, in terms of when it comes to setting up a car and in terms of everything you've just explained, is that pretty much identical from sim racing to real racing?
Yeah, the approach, what funny is with our team is like we are a hybrid between real drivers, professional drivers, not only Max, but many more, and sim racers, the best in the world. And the way they approach a setup is different because the real drivers, the pro drivers, they are used to have 1 or 2 sessions, maybe 2, 3, 4 flying laps, and that's where they need to build their basic of their feedback on to the engineers in the briefing.
So sorry, what drivers do you have on, like that are professional real drivers as well?
Yeah, we have Alex Palou, Shane van Gisbergen, Kelvin van der Linde. We have a whole list of drivers, basically.
So from a real variety of different disciplines.
Yeah, we call them ambassadors of Team Redline because they are with the team, but of course their main job is driving the real cars in the real track. But all these guys, they are part of our teams because they have a passion for sim racing, and they use sim racing as a tool for training or to stay competitive over the winter. So yeah, they are very sim racing minded. But the difference is like the real drivers, they create a setup in this. They know exactly what to look for. So they drive a couple of laps. Okay, this is what I look for. This is what I change, and then they drive again. And the sim racers are more trial and error because they used to do like hundreds of laps, and they aren't always forced to make the right decision in one line of feedback. But they can try, let's try different springs or a complete different angle of approach in the setup. And yeah, that's what we need to bring together a little bit in the team to get the best of both, basically.
That's a good point. No, because I think that you've got this, variety of talent at your kind of hands, but also that's the thing. I think there's such a variety of different ways of going about it. And I guess all these drivers have slightly different styles because they come from slightly different disciplines.
Yeah.
And I guess it's your job to, when it comes to if there's a virtual Le Mans or if it's, whatever the event is, are you making a decision as director as to, right, I think these drivers are going to be best suited to this event? Is that how it works?
Yeah. Not me only making the decision. It's like a decision together. And sometimes we have more drivers than seats for certain competitions.
Which is a nice problem to have, I guess.
Yeah, and we have, it's a luxury problem in Team Redline that we have like many winning characters with their own personality needing to work together for big competition and fight for certain spots. And this is not always easy, but it's not only me and Team Redline. We also have management. We have a sporting director. We have engineers. We have Max also giving his opinion very clearly about what he thinks is the right way to go. So we make a joint decision, but the ultimate decision, depending on who our partners are. For example, if we drive races with BMW, then we have a select group of drivers representing BMW this season. So yeah, it's a well-discussed decision always to align the drivers for a certain competition.
And also kind of, how do you measure the effectiveness of, particularly for these real professional drivers like Max, like Lando, like Alex, how do you measure the value that comes from sim race practicing? Because I remember earlier this year there were a few articles talking, I think there was some comments made by maybe Lando, or I can't remember exactly, but it was around the idea that, with Lando and Max coming in and having all this sim racing background and being able to train compared to the older drivers on the grid, like Sebastian, like Lewis, who don't have that same attachment to the simulator. Do you think there is there a way of measuring how impactful? Because nothing can replace the real thing, I guess, for these drivers, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's hard to measure. It's impossible to measure. What we're getting to, though, is a stage where the real racers, the new generation of Formula drivers, they all grew up in karting and sim racing.
They're all going to be sim racers in 10 years, aren't they?
Yeah, because there's nothing better for these guys to go home from track doing what they love on track, to go back home and keep doing the same thing. Like in a sim where there is no pressure, there's no sponsors, there's no one looking over your shoulder, and just have fun doing your hobby. And it teaches them a thing or two. You learn how to work with the setup, you learn to think about the setup and make accurate decisions. And these guys, I'm pretty sure, like they handle sim racing and they look at the setup, but at some point they realize, like, hey, if I approach this in a real car, we get a different result, and then maybe I can communicate it differently. Plus, it's unlimited practice. Your coordination gets constantly pushed to the limit. Sim racing is a world where there's a lot of talent around. It's an unlimited pool of talent, pretty much, and it's for real drivers. It's a good practice because on the track, of course, you have professional drivers, but the top of sim racing is much broader than actual real racing. So when it comes to, and I think, I cannot speak for Max, but I believe that he kind of enjoys the level of sim racing because it's such a high level that he really needs to push, put it at 10 or 20 or sometimes 50 hours of work in to beat those guys, and that's what feeds these guys.
This is what I think is a kind of underappreciated. Something I love about sim racing is that I think that it offers an opportunity to get into a sport that for so many is behind a massive paywall. Sure, these sim rigs, I mean, some of the sim rigs you've got here are beautiful and they're clearly not cheap. But obviously as time goes on, and it's certainly more accessible than spending, 6 figures top tier carts. What I think it does is it allows a broader spectrum of people who want to be racing drivers, because it's not an accessible sport to get into. But do you think that, I don't think obviously sim racing will ever replace the real stuff, but I like to think, and I don't know if you agree, but the availability of sim racing combined with doing some real racing, but maybe not as much, could cultivate a more competitive and more open and more inclusive motorsport, not just in F1, just motorsport generally.
I think it already does. If you compare the level of the grids to 10, 20 years back when sim racing wasn't a thing, I think the level was completely different. Like there was a much bigger difference between the top drivers. Like the Sennas and the Schumachers will always be top tier, even in these years if they would step into a car. But the general, everyone is so fine-tuned in what they do on track. They have done it a million times in the sim, probably, all the young drivers. They have a complete new baseline. They know the tracks inside out. They know every centimeter because all the tracks are laser scanned available nowadays in sims. So it makes a massive difference already nowadays, but you cannot measure it. You can only compare it. How is it now? How was it in the past? But I think it's just where drivers had a normal job and they went to the racetrack for racing in the past. They are now full professional drivers going to the track, going back home, drive there again. I think that's going to be a little bit more the future when it compares to real racing. And on esports, it's hard to predict, but it's we had a big boost in the Corona period, in the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now it's leveling a bit, and now the big competitions coming up with ESL Rensport coming up. We have Virtual Le Mans. These competitions are all born the last years, and they are mega.
That's what I mean. We're right at the start. This is what I feel like. You've got this amazing facility, and you're just at the start. Like, do you have any expectations beyond just there being more eyeballs and more people watching, of where this space is going to go in the next 10 years?
I think there will be a bigger overlap. Like, more drivers in esports will move their way to real racing. I think the brands, the manufacturers, getting involved quite a lot. In our example, BMW, where we tightly connected to, they are of course also racing on the real track, But what you see is like many competitions, what they offer as a prize is like a seat in a real car for a season. And those will be more, I think. It's super nice. It's a good way to see talent performing and screen them for the real track. So I think this will happen more and more, definitely.
Well, you say VAR as well, and is that where you met Max? Because it was VAR he was racing for in Formula 3, right?
Yeah.
Before he got the
moment he got his seat done by Van Amersfoort Racing was where I met Max for the first time, because I was getting my seat done as well for my test. So that was the first time we met. At that time, I was already working like a year with him, with them to train drivers from Van Amersfoort Racing in the sim. They built a whole new sim, which was very state of the art at that point, and they used me as a reference driver to challenge their drivers, basically what we do here as well now. That's where I met Max, and that year I started training with Max in the simulator. So either we were both at Van Amersfoort driving that big sim and challenging each other, or I was in my office in the north of Holland and he was in the sim of Van Amersfoort, and we connected the sims and we were racing each other, which Max liked way more, of course, because then you could see his real power and his real urge to win was very clear at that point. And I kept doing that even after Max went to F1. We kept doing this kind of training together in the first year with Toro Rosso as well. And I kept working with Van Amersfoort. So the next year was Leclerc, and we did the same thing with Leclerc. And then Team Redline, and a few years later we had Norris, and so basically Norris, Leclerc, Max, these three.
It's a pretty good track record.
It's very cool to work with.
Amazing.
Not claiming any credits. It's just it's really cool. It's an honor to work with these guys.
No, so when Max joined VAR, and when you first, what was your impression when you first met him? Like, did you have this anticipation that, oh, he's going to be the next big thing? Or was it just, oh, this is another driver? Obviously he had, he's got his dad's surname as well, so there's a weight to that. But was there this expectation that he was going to be just another driver, or did you think, oh, this kid's special?
Yeah, well, it got announced, and in the Dutch media there's a lot of hype around him. Of
course, yeah.
Mainly because of Jos. Jos was our superstar at the point in F1. He was not active anymore, but Max was the world champion in karting. Everyone expected a lot from him in racing, but no one really knew like what Jos knew, like how special he is at that point. So the first times I was driving against him, challenging him, then we could see like, oh damn, he's quick in the sim as well. And where I was on my best level ever, driving on the highest competitions in sim racing, he was able to jump in the sim and match my lap times and actually push me to the limit.
Straight away?
Straight away, pretty much, yeah.
Oh.
And, that was very, for me that was quite clear that, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Leclerc had the same thing actually. Like, he jumped in the sim and he was so clean, so smooth, so fast. But Max had this little bit of fighting spirit. Well, not a little bit, bucket loads of fighting spirit. And all he wanted to do was overtake, battle together, link the sims up, battle together, and on the most impossible tracks, try still to find a way to overtake.
Yeah.
It was his nature. And we could do this for days, like for hours. I think Spa was a good example at some point where he did that overtake around Blanchimont. And the week before, we linked the sims up in iRacing. Spa was laser scan. We put the F1 model in, and we kept. And the only places to overtake basically was Blanchimont. Well, at some point you start to defend the inside, so the only way is around. So he knew it was possible to do it around based on what he did in the sim. But yeah, we kept doing that in a way that.
That's really interesting. So you could, it makes sense. You can replay certain scenarios, and practice that specific scenario in a sim, just again and again and again, to try each different permutation. You stay wide, or you stay on the inside.
Yeah, and with Max, everything is very natural, so he can find his way around a driver by nature or by skill or by training with yourself from karting. It's a combination of everything. But most drivers, they don't have this skill. Pretty much no one can match Max's skill. I'm quite convinced at this point. So these guys, you need to train. If they want to improve that kind of skill, you cannot train it to 100% perfect, but at least you can go from 50 to 90% and you can cover that area by constantly putting them in scenarios where they need to make a choice, either defending or attacking or picking a line and braking late and finding the limit on the braking. There's a lot that comes to it, and it can only be done properly if you drive, now it's getting quite technical, but when you drive from a subconscious mind, where everything is natural in the flow, and then you send it in and you can survive without locking up and going straight. If you cover that with hours of practice and you cover every track, every corner, how to overtake, where to defend, where you're strong, where you're weak, you become a much smarter driver. So it is definitely a tool for these guys to improve their skills on track. And I think with all that sim racing that these young guys do nowadays, they are developing these skills. So you can see a much higher level in general on the track, with overtaking, with pure performance, with very little practice. Everyone is just always there. Like if they do a free practice, the second lap they do, they're there because they did so much prep already in the sim.
But that's the thing I think with the sim, is that with the sim, there's nowhere to hide. In specifically Formula One anyway, there will always be, the car, because not everyone's in the same machinery. In the sim, you can artificially make everything absolutely identical. There's nowhere to hide. And the fact that you hold Max in such high regard, like in terms of having that natural feel, and that, do you think that's, how much do you think that is training, and how much of that is just a born natural gift? I'm just asking for your opinion. Who knows? But like,
let's put it this way: Max is so good as he is right now because it's a born natural gift with millions of hours of training.
The perfect storm of both.
He has the best of both, and he will only get stronger. The rough edges are off, and now, like this year, he's a machine. Like you cannot beat him if he's on his top of his level like this. So even if you're super talented, it's still trainable, and you can still fine tune it. It's not a reason to lean back. It's the same what I've seen in speed skating. We had super talented guys, but they only started booking results if they actually put in the hard work. When there was a coach who put them on the spot, like you're not getting any special treatment. You're gonna do your 8 hours of boring training per day. These guys started to grow because their ceiling is higher. They have much more they can reach than someone who doesn't have that natural feeling. So yes, if you don't have the natural feeling, you can train it. But yes, if you have that natural feeling, you can still train it. So everything is trainable.
What do you think of Leclerc, Norris, the two drivers at the top of their game at the moment, who you've worked with? Do you think they're close to Max? Do you like in the right? So as a fan watching, I feel like if McLaren and Ferrari can give them to a car to compete with a Red Bull, I feel that they can go toe to toe. I don't think they're at. I think Max he's got so much experience now, but I feel like Leclerc and Norris are the two closest. Personally, more than maybe George. I think George is great, but I think they must be close.
I think George is up there. This guy is really good. For me, if you win your Formula 2 season in your first attempt, for me, then you're
quite
proper
convincingly
talent.
as well.
Yeah. And in Formula 2, there's no big difference in between teams anymore. So if you drive for a certain team, yes, you need to pick one of the top three, you have a better chance. But if you're actually a really good driver, and what you saw with Leclerc, the guy was so dominant. What you said, but Russell, the same. He was incredible that year, and I think that shows a lot about the potential a driver has. Norris, I think he had quite a competitive year, but Norris is a worker, in my opinion. And this guy, he can reach new limits, and he keeps working. I really respect his attitude towards performing, and Well, we had him in Redline, of course, and even drove Le Mans with him. And I like these guys are the kind of the personalities I like to work with because I can learn from them
That's
rather
what I
than
mean.
the
It
other
must
way
be great
around.
for you working
Yeah.
with these calibers. Right? Like, say I gave you, I don't know, a race trace from Max and from Lando and took their names off.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to tell them apart? Even if, say, the lap times were the same,
Mm-hmm.
would you be able to tell the two different?
Oh yeah, easy.
Really?
Yeah.
So even at the top level, this is what I find interesting because you think in racing that there is this like perfect way of driving, and there's just one. Like you would assume that there's just one way of optimally doing it. But if you've got Lando and Max having, like you say, a clear discrepancy, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a um, there is a certain style of driving that fits pretty much all the cars. Like it's a certain way of braking, and in the end, also what Max always says is just the throttle pedal, brake pedal, and the steering wheel and the shifter.
It's simple.
That's
Why are
quite
we
simple.
complicating things?
And in the end, what you do is you play with the grip. You put the load of the car on certain positions. So by braking, you move it forward. By applying throttle, you move it backwards. And this has a massive effect on the rotation of the car and how you can set the car for a corner. And it's not just slamming the brakes, hitting the throttles, and yanking the wheel around, because then you will be 5 seconds slower than someone who's inch perfect with everything. And I think, for example, what makes Max very strong is that he's very dynamic in his driving. So he can drive an impossible car and still send it over the limit just on the edge of optimal performance, better than anyone.
Well,
So
so you say that I wrote down there was a quote from Alex Albon, and he was talking about Max and basically just saying how he loves like he needs he can drive a car that's so sharp
yeah,
that's just
yeah,
and obviously you know probably better than
yeah.
pretty much anyone what does that actually mean?
Okay, so what you saw maybe beginning of the season was that the Red Bull was a bit of a lazy car. You could see Sergio.
It was heavy, it was overweight,
Yeah,
wasn't it? Yeah.
it was very easy to drive because it was leaning towards understeer.
Yeah.
Understeer is a very boring way to drive a car because whatever you do with the brake pedal, at a certain point the car just doesn't rotate more. A pointy car is the opposite. The car wants to rotate more than you want, basically. And what Max does very well, he can balance the car that is actually too pointy for everyone. No one can handle it because they start sliding. Max manages to make that car perfectly smooth, to make use of that extra rotation, and he can cancel it with his inputs on the points where he doesn't need it. And that pretty much you can extract more potential from a car if you can handle that kind of balance.
Yeah.
I think you could see it with the Mercedes when Valtteri and Hamilton last year were very close to each other. The car was very much on rails. Like there was not a lot, and you could see always Max fighting a little bit more because that's what he needed to do to get the maximum out of the car. And I think at the end of the year, or the second part of the year, this is what I see, what I think is happening. The car became a bit more towards Max's liking, and then he can extract the extra performance, and then that's where the split between him and Sergio arises. And this is something with a textbook driving style, which is aggressive on the brake, very smooth off the brake, rotating at the right point. You can get within 5/10, but that last 5/10 is dancing on a very thin line, balancing the car, and stepping away from that textbook braking style. It's still there in the basics, but it needs to be adjusted in millimeters to have a positive effect on the balance. And that's what he can do better than others. And I think Leclerc is very good at that as well. But some drivers have to work really hard, have a lot of experience. Some drivers are very talented, like Ricciardo, but they can struggle for 2 years because they cannot adjust to a certain car balance. It depends per driver, but I think one of his strengths from Max is that he can drive an understeer car, but then Sergio is closer because the limit is easier to reach. But once the car is more pointy and he gets it to his liking, then he's out of this world. And that's what he will always be fighting for with the team, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, my understanding is that, you know, when Max goes out, he's like 100% straight away, and that most other drivers, would you say, are not like that? Would you say most other drivers kind of work their way in?
Yeah.
Or is that because it makes sense to kind of, when you explain it, it's like, well, yeah, of course, like he wants to find the limits of grip.
Yeah.
The sooner he finds that, then he'll know where that is quicker.
To me, in a free practice is what you want. You want to get, instead of building up from one lap 60%, then one lap 70, 80, 90, and then you go to 95, 96, 97, build it up to the limit. What you want is have so much control. You are so much in control of your car that you can send it over the limit in lap 2, basically, of free practice. And then you know where the real limit is. So if you just, let's say it's in percentage, what Max can do is drive a car in free practice 1 on 101% to see what does the car over the limit. And then he only has to take one step back to get the maximum out. And you can see when someone is over driving, he's locking up, he's oversteering, sliding around too much. And you see them doing that quite a lot in FP1. But Max, and this is also how he got educated by Jos probably, always make sure that you reach the limit as soon as possible, because the sooner you reach it, the more accurate your feedback is to your engineers to develop the car to your liking.
Especially when there's such limited time as well.
Yeah.
Because that's even more important. Then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And time is money. Time is also performance.
Yeah.
If you give them a week between free practice and quali, well, the cars will be a lot quicker. So you need to do it in between FP3 and quali, where you actually get a lot of feedback from the car, and you need to address it, communicate it, debrief everything, and then make the change to the car. You only have 1 hour to do it. So the more you can gather in terms of information already in free practice 1 or free practice 2, the better. And what's actually funny, and that's how it translates as well, his talent from real racing to sim racing. In sim racing, we can measure everything. Like there is no GPS signal loss or whatever. Everything is perfectly accurate.
I guess there's not as many variables as well, because that wind
Same,
direction.
yeah, exactly. And we have tools, of course, with sim racing, with Team Redline, where we can analyze the driving line, the braking, everything. It's basically the same we can do as with the real car in terms of telemetry output. Max was always, like, one of his best races, of his best race probably, was the Bathurst 12 hours, where he did a qualifying lap, and I think it was almost a second quicker than the rest of the field. But he put 50 hours of practice in for that race. He was completely mental.
You're like
in a good
on
way.
the walls around Bathurst.
Yeah,
like that track is crazy.
Track is crazy. It's a nightmare. You drive at night, you don't see anything. And he's driving this close from the wall in a quali lap, full under pressure, because you only have 1 lap for that race.
On the sim, do they have kangaroos on the track?
No, but I heard they smash a few everywhere.
They've had a few. They've had trees falling down and all that. It's mad.
But when we started comparing Max to his teammates who couldn't match his lap times, and then you could always see that you want to set up a corner quite wide, and then you make it very round to have the most efficient line as possible through a corner, depending on the corner. But Max was always able to take a bit deeper line into the corner, because he was able to rotate the car just a little bit better at a certain point on track than the rest was, even compared to the world's best sim racers, who also have 1 million hours to practice practically. And even there, Max was able to rotate the car just that little bit better than the rest, and it makes him unbeatable. Especially, Max drives these sim races on the highest level, but he has no time at all to practice. Like the schedule of Formula One is absolutely ridiculous. And the time he spends in the sim then, and he's very limited compared to other drivers, so he needs to pick it up there quickly as well. But once he has a race, like the Bathurst is a perfect example where he can put the 50 hours in, then you can see how good he is with putting the laps in, his driving style, his talent, his overview, his communication, his teamwork, everything is just close to perfect. And that makes him very special.
Because that's the thing, right? I came into this conversation very much with this perception. I think a lot of people have this idea that Max has a predefined kind of driving style, and that you look at, Jenson Button, for example, who's known for being very smooth. Vettel's known for like squaring off the corners a bit more to optimize exit. And obviously, when you look at drivers from the history, like, growing up watching Schumacher and looking back at Senna. Part of me is like, it feels like Max doesn't actually have a defined style. He will just adapt. But if you could compare who you think Max's style, if he has one, is closest to who's existed before, whether it's again a Michael, from your understanding of how other greats of the sport have approached the sport, do you think Max's style is closest to anyone else?
To Schumacher, I wouldn't know. Senna was, of course, very aggressive at points. I think he compares a little bit more to that, but the cars were different, the tires were different, and Max stepped into F1 in the Pirelli era where you have, in F1 it's all about handling the tires. So you need to be smooth from session one. You need to, even in F1, being slidey, so slide around, the car is still smooth compared to other series where you have different tires. So everything depends on the tires you drive with. But yeah, like I said, Max, if he has a car that rotates well, it's a bit more oversteery. He likes that, and I think that compares well maybe to the style of Senna. But I don't know Senna. I've never seen his data. I only know his physical therapist, who's a physical therapist at Alfa Romeo as well.
Yeah.
For the rest, I wouldn't know. It's hard to say. He has his own style.
It is obviously, with different generations, but you do feel like, Max's kind of approach, and like you said, like when you were racing with him, he'd just go for it. You know what I mean? He'd go for these opportunities. But I want to go back to Redline. Obviously, you had that relationship at VAR. How did Max join in being a part of Redline? How did that begin? And is he just like another driver as part of Redline, or is he more involved in terms of behind the scenes as well?
He's definitely more involved behind the scenes. Like he's helping with everything. You could almost call him a manager, but he's our ambassador.
But like, where did that begin? Like, did he reach out to you? Did you reach out to him? Like,
now let me think. After he went to Toro Rosso, we kept driving together, and he kind of liked it, but kind of liked the racing in the sim.
Yeah.
However, at some point I was with Redline, but what was most important was Max was very young at that stage, and he was a celebrity already in Holland, and sim racing was such a weird place at that point that if I told him to sign up for iRacing, start driving, he would be in all the newspapers within a week because some stuff will happen and he doesn't oversee the consequences at that point of his career. Like if we just let him go and enjoy and crash around and have fun. So what we decided at some point, I thought like Team Redline, we had a structure with the best drivers in the world. It's a virtual gated community basically. Like no one can see what happens in Redline. Besides the drivers themselves, everyone is under strict contract and NDA. So it's a very nice, safe surrounding for him, especially in the beginning of his career, where he could drive all day without being bothered by people. Because I've been with him in Holland, and once you open the door and people see him, he's getting ambushed by people, and it's the same online.
Yeah.
So we had to find a way to protect him there. So I said, okay, maybe join Team Redline. Then you always have great, I don't know if it's an English word, sparring partners. To get challenged. Like I was always challenging him with the one-on-one training, and he could do it for every day, and he did. So we signed him up. I think somewhere, what was it, 2016 maybe. And that was the beginning actually. And then he stepped away from sim racing for a few years, or for 2 years, I think. And after that, he came back strong. And since then, he has been with us. He has always been part of Team Redline.
Yeah.
And Max and I have always stayed in contact, even if he wasn't sim racing at that point in 2017. We always stayed in touch. And then at some point, he went back into sim racing. He started doing competitions. He started helping with the team. He got a lot more experience from F1, of course, at that point. So he became a very mature personality in the team to help out behind the scenes as well. And then at some point he became a team leader where he was not driving himself per se, but helping others out, like explaining telemetry, explaining driving style, but mostly explaining attitude to the drivers in the team, because that's very logic that sim racers cannot have the same attitude towards performing as real racers because they haven't gone through the same school, but they can definitely be inspired. And I think Max was a great inspiration there the last years, by first of all being quick as hell, second his attitude towards performing. He doesn't take he will never be satisfied with P2. And then he's also a team leader when it comes to putting the work in for others, maybe. And I think there's been plenty of situations where he was in an F1 weekend. He brought his laptop and his controller, and he started helping drivers in the team for a competition during an F1 weekend in his motorhome, making a setup for other guys.
I was literally gonna. I was like, how much time do you get with this man? Because he's an F1 driver. Like, do you hear from him at all over the F1 weekend? But clearly you do.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
That's
a lot
amazing
of...
that he's got the capacity. Like that, I think that says everything about how much he's clearly invested and cares about the sim racing side.
Yeah, he is. He takes very good care of the team, and the team are his friends as well. So he's in constant communication with the team channel, with the drivers, with his friends. I think that's his comfort zone as well. Like where everyone is reaching out to him, pulling him, trying to get answers on interview or pictures. Team Redline is his friend group where he is only bothered when it comes to performance, the thing he likes. And I think, it's settled very nicely the last couple of years that way. And like I said before, he grew out from a driver to someone who's leading the team, going much further by helping other drivers. And then we are speaking about sim drivers who are maybe 18 years old, 18, and driving in their basement, never met Max. But Max, in his race weekend, he's until in between sessions or in the evening, he's helping them out, making a setup for them so they can perform better. And I think that's very typical for him, because what you see on the F1 track is a professional athlete who is structured. I know how life is in F1, and even with Alfa Romeo, it's very, very hard to find time for yourself as a driver.
Yeah.
And so the image you get from him from a racetrack is very static, like interview, and then pull back and make sure you can relax and focus on the session. And he finds the time to help other people in the time he has for himself, which is very, you wouldn't expect that from him, basically, if you know him from performing. And well, he's an animal on track. He's a winning machine, so he will do everything it takes to win. And in my opinion, it's the only way to win. Like, you have to be not always the nicest person, to put it in the right words, to be win. Otherwise, people will walk right over you.
You've got to be selfish. You've got to be uncompromising, I suppose, if you want to get to the very top. Like he must have to, like, F1 driver putting loads of time into Redline as well. Like, I can imagine, what's his relationship with, like, because obviously, Max has got his place in Monaco. Like, I imagine the sim rig is like the prime. I bet that's his pride and joy.
Yeah, it's in the corner of his house, and that's where he spent most of the day, I guess. It's he has a good sim at home, and he likes the details. He likes to think about how things look, and if we have with our partners, like here behind the steering wheel, the pedals, the wheelbase, if we can make something custom made Redline style or put his logo on, these are the things he enjoys. He's very about details. And yeah, his sim is, I don't know, you probably have to ask him, but looks like his holy space in the house where no one touches his sim, and it's his thing. And when he comes home, that's his gym.
Well, I remember it was like, was it, didn't he like, he was moving in or moving out, and like the sim rig was, typically the first thing is like TV, pizza. That's like the first two things you do when you move into a new.
Yeah.
And was his like sim rig like the first or last thing he packed up?
Yeah, that was this year. It was Virtual Mall Series. He drove the race of what was it, Spa?
Yeah.
And he was moving places, and the whole house was empty. And then he sent a picture like, guys, I'm done, and this is the only thing left. And there was this whole room
so
empty.
he was moving out.
He went to a different place basically, and but only his sim was there still, because he didn't want to touch his sim. He didn't want to move his sim right before the race, because what if something is not connected? So everything was out except his sim, just to make sure the sim was untouched before that race. And it was quite a funny photo, actually. It was very lonely in a big house, in a big apartment, and there's this one simulator there left with Max in there.
No distraction. Oh, if I tried that, my wife wouldn't be happy if I tried to pull that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to move my sim out of the house as well for the baby room. And yeah, now it's here, though. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, you've got a beautiful space for it now. No, that's the thing. It's that kind of, that's what I find really interesting. It's that kind of dedication and absolute kind of obsession with the craft. Did you think Max kind of appreciates from because obviously now with your job as director and Team Redline, you won Esports Team of the Year. Congratulations.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, thank you.
Like, you're at the top of your game. This is an industry that's clearly going and moving in a positive direction. You're clearly, obsessed with your craft and what you do as well. But do you think Max also recognizes where this is going, in terms of, this is an industry that's going to get bigger? He can, being part of Redline and leading that, and like you said earlier, like drawing all these eyeballs and all this attention to sim racing, just like how F1's blown up in the last kind of 5 or so years.
Yeah.
And with lockdown, that probably accelerated sim racing by a good couple of years at least. Do you think Max recognizes that as well, or is he just like, I just love racing, so I just want to be here?
Yeah, I think the baseline is he loves racing, and he wants to be in a team that is full with talent and he can compete with and win races together with. He loves endurance races. But yeah, with Max, it's very important that he keeps doing it as a hobby. Like Formula One is his work, also his hobby, I hope for him. But sim racing needs to be seen as a hobby. And the way we move forward in the future is, like, we have a big management team who need to do the business side of the team. Max will help and helps us a lot. But we will not bother Max with things he should not be taken care of, because it takes time away from his hobby, which is driving with the team. And another part of his hobby is building a team and making a winning machine out of a team. And yeah, of course, Verstappen Racing Red Bull is now part of Team Redline, or we are part of Verstappen Racing Red Bull. And that's a very big step into the future, as lining those two parties up. But yeah, for the future, we don't know what the future will bring. We're going to go into ESL now with Rennsport. That's the next main thing for the upcoming months. And we have to see how the market will evolve and where it's all going, because sim racing is very niche. And we have F1 Esports, which...
I was going to ask your opinion on that, actually. Because F1 Esports, obviously, where it is endorsed by Formula One, in terms of the exposure, they can put it on the official F1 channel. The concurrent viewership is pretty good. Like, I've been following it a lot this year, and like, I feel like it, in the same way that, F1 growing, I think also benefits IndyCar. Also benefits Le Mans. Also benefits Super Formula. And I think the trickle down, it gets people into motorsport. Do you feel? I feel like potentially F1 Esports is going to be that because the F1 game is the most probably accessible.
Yeah.
Because it's got the title. It's like FIFA with football, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it gets people in. So hopefully that knock-on effect is that it gets, you know, you might get 2% of those people who convert getting into sim racing, but then all of a sudden that 2% is of a much bigger pie of people.
Yeah. Sim racing is a niche market. It's F1 Esports is, for, like you said, it's very accessible. But to make such software accessible, you need to scale down some physics parts. You need to make it a bit less realistic to make it fun for everyone to drive. And my son, when he is 5-6 years old, he needs to be able to play F1 Esports, the game. And the other software platforms where we are currently very active with Team Redline is iRacing, rFactor 2, Assetto Corsa. These sims are more based on realism. Like it needs, their main goal is to overlap the racing as much as possible in terms of feeling with the real thing. F1 game is going there a little bit more, but it's not a competition where we are active at this point because of this reason, because we have the drivers in the team who are really into the simulation games. And but the mainstream of the main viewers are in the F1 Esports, which is something we need to make a decision. And we have been active in the past, but our drivers are just way more happy driving what they love the most. But never say never. You know, if we have all the assets to enter F1 Esports again at some point, but the problem is with F1 Esports is we cannot enter as Team Redline, because we are not a Formula One team. So that makes it already a little bit less attractive for us. And at this point, the main reason why we are not part of it. So yeah, let's see. Hopefully F1 Esports build something closer to realism or more into simulation.
I could see a day where you've got, you know, it's almost like two engines baked into one game potentially, because clearly, you know, F1 they're putting money behind F1 Esports, and there's a clear kind of intent and understanding from the teams, and because all the teams are represented now. So that's going to be, I'm really interested to see how that goes, because I feel like that is the most accessible route in, and hopefully they can get it to a stage where, because you want the best of the best, and you know, it again, in the sim you can't hide. You know what I mean? That everything's on show. It's your purely your talent skill level. With Max Verstappen in a sim, where would you put him in the world in terms of where does he rank amongst the best? You got Kevin Siggy, part of Team Redline,
top three,
incredible, top three, in the world, and he's an F1 driver full time, and can only part time this, and he's still top three in the world.
No, if he has the time, top three, definitely.
That's mad.
Well, it's out there, the records. If he drives competitions, and he's always driving the competitions where the best in the world compete, he's always up there.
That's incredible.
Even with 1 hour of practice, he's still doing a top 10 performance versus guys who do 100 hours of prep. And so all his main competitor is how much time does he have to prepare. And if he has that time, then you see races like he did in Bathurst, where he's unbeatable. And then there are some out of this world talents in sim racing, not only in our team, but also in other teams. Kevin, for example, in rFactor, he's a very complete driver, Kevin Siggy. Kevin and Max could be on the same level of driving when it comes to handling setups and the complete picture. The thing what Max has is, as an advantage, always he's very, very comfortable in traffic. Like we always do endurance races with Team Redline, so you need to navigate through traffic. You need to overtake drivers, and that's where he's just better than everyone. So, for example, if we have the 24 Hour of Le Mans, part of your lap time is always influenced by how do you cope with traffic, how do you navigate through, and if you do that a certain smart way by anticipating on what's going to happen a couple of corners later. If you see a GTA coming close, he's a little bit smarter with that in general, and he's more aggressive in general, which also sometimes bites him in the ass, of course. But he's the kind of guy we can always put in the car and trust that he will do the job.
Yeah.
You never have to doubt him.
You've just reminded me of something there, actually. I feel like Max is incredibly good at safety car restarts in F1. Do you agree? And do you think that's is that like something he practices in the sim and having that understanding of, cars around him, I suppose?
It's also thinking a little bit ahead. Like I think that race in Interlagos when it was wet, where he overtook Rosberg and turned free on the outside, that was one of the races. What he did in that safety car lap to see where the grip is, and he's always thinking a little bit ahead because he has that mental bandwidth to do things, to store extra information, where everyone is focusing on one thing and that's driving. What makes him unique, and maybe a different way of saying it, is he can talk and drive at the same time, and his driving won't be affected. If I drive a race at Le Mans and I start talking for 20 seconds in the lap, I lose half a second of lap time because I cannot combine talking and racing at the same time.
Max is telling GP to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Is that what?
No, the guy has so much overcapacity that the driving itself only takes a little.
See, I think that is part, when we say about natural gift, I think having that capacity in your mind, yeah, obviously your brain can be trained, but I feel like that's part of it. Yeah. I think that's part of
definitely.
That trying to actually contextualize what having a natural gift, and we talk about this in all different sports, Messi or whatever. I think with F1 it is that brain capacity to be able to think about so much, because you've got the wheel with complicated, you're trying to, cars around you can't really see anything because of the halo, yet you've still got this ability to, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's so much in his subconscious mind. Everything he does it goes automatic, and he doesn't have to put effort in it. Of course he has to, but it's so trained so well that he doesn't really have to think about a lot of stuff. And if then things require him to think, he has a lot of room left to handle these situations. If it's set up for communication with the pit wall, or finding lines or grip spots during a safety car lap or whatever during rain, that's where he has this little bit of extra capacity compared to others.
I did also want to ask about, remember Mexico, the 122, after 122, after 122?
Yeah.
Explain that. Was it Max driving the same lap after lap after lap? Was that a conscious decision? Do you know? Like, is there anything deep in that? Because from the outside looking in, it looks like a machine driving. Yeah. Consistency.
Yeah. Actually, in real racing, this is even more difficult because, of course, the tires are different. The wind, the temperature, everything changes throughout the stint or a race. It looks really cool to have this stint full with the 121s, or what was it? Yeah, of course, you need to be Mr. Consistency to consistently push the tires and the car to the limit. So the more consistent you are, the better. But most important is to be consistent on the limit. So you can drive 121 or you can drive 23 for a whole stint, but if you're 1 second off the rest, then it's not interesting. But what makes him so good is he can drive the car on the limit, keep the tires in the right window. If he tried to push for 120.9, for example, he would have pushed the tires out of the window of temperature, and then everything would have gone backwards. So doing a stint like that is managing a lot of things at the same time. A lot of settings on the steering wheel. You change the balance of the car throughout the stint with the tools on the steering wheel. Plus, you need to keep the tires alive, and that's the main trick. So, yeah, that stint has a lot more behind the scenes, behind the steering wheel than the eye sees, basically, and it makes him.
Well, because that's something I want to educate myself more on. Like when we talk about preserving the tires, like, beyond minimizing oversteer and opening up the corner as much as you can, are they the two main things, or are there other significant factors when it comes to saving the tire?
Yeah, well, in F1, of course, the tires are super sensitive, and depends on the compound you drive with, and the hards they can handle a lot more than the softs. And even the soft compound is not always the same soft over the year. It's the C3, 4, or 5, and they are changing per track. It depends on the track roughness and a lot of factors. And then Pirelli makes a choice which tires is going to be, and that's what everyone sticks to. What helps you saving the tires? It's a lot in the details. Of course, you need to keep the temperatures down. So what you can do in the beginning of a stint on a heavy car is push everything out of the tires, overheat them, create graining, blistering, everything, and then after 5 laps, the tires will drop 1, 2, sometimes 3, 4 seconds per lap. And in the end, over the stint, you lose way more than you have gained in those first couple of laps. So you need to push the maximum out of the car, keeping the tires in the right window, not sliding, because if you slide, the tire temperatures go up. And once they are over that limit, it's very hard to get them back in again, because then you need to slow down the car quite a lot to make sure the tires can cool down again. And then you have actually the wear of the rubber as well. So once the rubber's wearing off, the tires have less grip. So the trick is to maybe save them a little bit in the beginning and not oversliding, not pushing. And then the last 5 and sometimes 10 laps of the stint, you can gently start to push them a bit more.
Yeah.
But the trick is, and in the beginning it was very boring for the drivers to drive under the limit of the car.
Yeah, of course.
But it's a new limit. The new limit is, how do you keep these tires alive? And this has a lot to do with feeling. Like, you need to feel how the tires, which is the weaker tire. For example, if the front right is the tire that gives up first, you need to manage that tire in specific corners. And the driver needs to feel this. The team is supporting a lot with that, of course. So the team already knows that, yeah, from previous year, we see this is probably going to be the tire that brings us trouble. So you need to make sure that you don't push too much in that and that and that corner. That is basically how all the teams operate. But the driver himself needs to feel it. And the stint in Mexico, where he was driving away from the field while managing his tires, very special. But it's also only possible to do it from the lead, because if you are chasing, then you have the factor of dirty air, which is more hard for the tires as well. Sometimes you have to overtake, and these take quite a chop out of the tire life. So from the lead, it's easier, but then you need to show that pace and feel perfectly how far can I push these tires to make sure I use them to their full potential when the stint is done and when I go to the new tires. And that's what he did quite well. I think in his first race for Red Bull, I think that was a good example, like how much feeling he has for these things, to be fully under pressure from Kimi, it was back then, and still keeping these tires alive. In his first race, in a new car, boy, that was special.
Yeah, especially with that opportunity. You could never have, or maybe in hindsight you could have, but predicted that Hamilton and Rosberg were going to take each other out.
Yeah.
What a race that was. Because I know that Max has spoken more recently about somewhat of an ambition, maybe it'll come to fruition, to race kind of GT, potentially Le Mans. And obviously he's done that numerous times in a simulator. Where do you think, I guess based off of your experience working with Max in these sims where you're able to get so close to the real thing, it's a totally different ball game. It's not open wheeled, you're in a cockpit and all that. Do you think Max would, I feel like I know your answer, because I feel like of course he would, but would Max be competitive at the front straight away? Do you think it would take him a bit of time?
Yeah.
Just done.
Yeah.
Straight up there.
Yeah. The level's high in these Le Mans races. The drivers are absolute superstars. But Max is a superstar on his own, and he will have no problems at all adapting to a car like that. In fact, I think he would nail it perfectly. Like, working with the team, what he likes about endurance racing with Team Redline is working together with his teammates.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He really enjoys that. It's more the team thing, having each other's backs, helping each other out. That's what he really enjoys. And in sim racing, that's a little bit more visible, and I think that's why he also likes endurance racing potentially for the future, because it's something you can share openly. It's more relaxed. The cars are a bit more old school maybe compared to Formula One, so you can actually make more changes yourself, suggestions in the setup, instead of everything being simulated by the engineers or the factory. So maybe what Max always talks about karting, because it was so pure, and I think endurance is the next step after Formula One for very pure racing, and I think he would do well there.
Yeah, I think that's such a different dynamic. It's kind of like in golf where you have like the Ryder Cup, where everyone's like working together to. You're not in it for yourself, just yourself. Because obviously, you know, F1's a team sport, but you're the one in the car. You're the one who wins or doesn't win the drivers' championship. So I think that dynamic, I'd love to see him give it a go.
Yeah, and what I think, what he's looking mostly forward is to share a performance with his team, with his teammates, with other drivers. I think it's something in his character, like he's a family man, and he sees his teammates as family, so he's really good to them, and he's very open to them. So yeah, like we discussed before, behind the scenes, he's a completely different person in terms of how much time he can take for everyone. And in the F1 paddock, he's, like I said, he's always honest, but it's very time limited. He needs to say to 100 journalists separately an honest answer. And what he's looking forward to is be open to have the time to communicate while doing real racing. And I think, at least that's what I think. You might need to ask him, but it's what attracts him into endurance racing.
Yeah, I'd love. Yeah, that would be. I could just imagine like a Verstappen, even if it was like a karting endurance event or something. Like, I think that dynamic. I'd love to see that. Imagine like a one-off in Formula One, where instead of having 2 cars per team, you had 1 car per team, but then both drivers. I'd have to work together then. I'd love to see that as like a one-off thing. But that's what Le Mans offers, which I think is so kind of unique. And I feel like in sim racing you see that. I guess it's more prevalent in these big sim racing, obviously not F1 Esports, but all the big events that have been going down more recently, like they are team events. And obviously for you, is it important that when there is a team race that the drivers fit together well? Is that, say you had your 4 best drivers, but then you had another 4 which weren't as collectively quite as strong, but they communicated and they got along better, even though they didn't maybe quite have the pace. Who would you choose?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think we face this issue a lot in Team Redline, where we have...
Because you've got so much talent as well.
Yeah, we have many superstars with completely different characters. Some click, some don't, and you need to find the right team together. In the end, with Redline, we will always go for performance. So even if it doesn't click, but they can still perform together to get the maximum result, then that's the way it is. And we need to guide the drivers to make sure that the communication is ideal. But to be honest, that's the biggest challenge as well in the team. Like, how do we match our characters? Because what we have compared to other teams is that we have 6, 7, 8 characters, for example, who can win the race, and they need to work together. While other teams, they often have 1 superstar, and then the rest around them is a bit less, like it works in F1 basically. You need to have the 1-star lineup, and if there are 2 stars in one team, it's getting a bit messy sometimes, and that's not always helping the team. In Team Redline, we have the triple or 4 times that issue, and that's a challenging situation. So where do I choose for? Performance, because I want the guys who work the hardest, put the best effort in, create the best setups, but mostly put down the lap times consistently, who handle traffic well, and over the stint, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and we can cover the one with the other. But in the end, I don't care if they don't like each other. They better like each other, because if you want to win,
Good answer.
you adjust.
Good answer.
Yeah, team
Bang their heads
goes.
together. Sort it out, you two. Stop
Yeah,
playing up.
yeah, and you know
It's not about you, it's about the team.
we will get into situations where someone needs to make a decision, and it is what it is. You cannot always have it perfect, but we can always try. And I will never go for a lesser result because two egos match better each other. No, the egos need to go, and then it needs to become a team, which is ultimately the dream. But with these kind of athletes, esport drivers, athletes, there's always an ego, you know, and
You need it. That is part of the recipe to succeed, having that ego.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
Which is
always
why it's so
manifest itself in the best way, I guess, when you're in a team environment.
Yeah, well, luckily we have found a way last year, and we won the main events, and we are leading the current ones. But it hasn't always been roses and rainbows. It's a lot of arguing going on behind the scenes, and yeah, that's part of.
It's top tier competition, isn't it?
Yeah, and esports is going that direction. Like it becomes like a professional sport very soon, as you start paying the drivers, and when there's a lot of prize money, sponsors like Red Bull and SimiCube, Hosingfeld, SimLab, their name is on stake. BMW represent. So the result on that part is more dominant than the driver's ego, and that's where we as a team need to learn, find a way. It cannot always be perfect, but we for sure can try.
Wanted to ask as well, I feel like in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of red flags. Some rightly, some a bit maybe too gun ho with the red flags. I think sometimes, but even in those instances, is Max still like contactable in those instances? Would he still like reach out to you during a red flag? Because sometimes the drivers just sat around, you know, feet up, waiting, watching the telly, waving at the camera.
Yeah, I don't know if I can say this, but let me put one example. I think I can't remember which race it was, but it was a red flag, and then the red flag took a bit longer. So once they have time to go back to their motorhome, Max is on the chat. Like, and I think we had an example.
Well, like on the group chat.
Yeah, and I think he was in a winning race. Honestly, I don't remember which race it was, but it was a red flag, and it took like half an hour, and all of a sudden I see these messages pop up, and so Max is talking about the setup of a race that's being done this weekend. And I'm like, dude, you have to be in the car like in 10 minutes, and you are working on the setup for your teammates, and you are giving feedback and information. It's crazy, like how much he can easily jump out of the car, do something else, jump back into the car and win that race again, and all in a time span of 30 minutes or 10 minutes even. Yeah, it was quite special.
Well, you'd think like, you don't want to get like the strategies mixed up. You know, that's the strategy for my actual race I'm doing now versus the strategy for next week's race. Like that shows some, it's like that capacity. Again, it's that mental capacity that's
I guess so.
Obviously a massive part of all. I guess you see this with most of the drivers that you work with, that their ability. It's just that, would you say Max is on the extreme level when it comes to that, having that capacity to juggle a lot of things?
Yeah. I think, again, you cannot measure it, but based on the results he does and the things he does on track, off the track, or in between sessions, he has a very special skill set when it comes to being in the right state of mind within a blink of a second, a blink of an eye. He can do that better than anyone.
Yeah.
This guy is special. Like everywhere he's performing, competing in racing, he's doing something that is extraordinary. And the world sees it now because now he's a world champion twice. But we are so lucky to work with him and to have him on our side. And to be part of his family, his racing family, it's a true honor, because it's probably one of the greatest we'll ever see.
He's doing everything he needs to do to, you think what he's going into his is it his 9th season in 23? I think because his first season was 2014, I think, Toro Rosso. So
Was that 2014?
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. And obviously he tested it. I think was it 2014. I think he had that. He had a go at Suzuka.
Yeah.
I think it was 2015.
15 was
full season.
yeah, was Toro Rosso, and then 16 was half Toro Rosso, half Red Bull.
Also, when you're at the race, and obviously in the off time in the evenings, does he ever message you like, actually, can we link up because I need to talk to you about setup for this weekend?
Nah.
You're like, leave me alone, Max.
Nah, setup wise, of course, F1, the two worlds are so separate, and we do discuss in the weekend, but on a very plain level, basics. How are you doing? What's going on? You think you're gonna fix it for tomorrow? All these things, and sometimes he gives me advice. Yeah, for sure, and it always helps. But nothing. We cannot discuss anything confidential,
No, of course,
on track. But we speak to each other as friends, and we look like what are the main things this weekend to take care of, and those are the things we discuss broadly. But
look, never know what the future holds. Maybe one day you'll be a maximum performance engineer.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've been thinking about like, what if that happens? But then I'm out of a job because I think he's on a level where I cannot add much. You know, if he's on such a high level of driving already. For me, right now, I'm in a situation where I can make a very positive difference and a big difference in certain situations. Red Bull is such a power team, such an amazing team, but just like Mercedes, but with Alfa, we need to do a lot more with a lot less. So,
but that's going to help your development as well.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
Also,
because I'm pushed quite hard on many things. It's not only the driver's performance, but it's also during the race, reading the track and seeing what's going on and advising people. But with Red Bull and Mercedes and Ferrari, they have these things. They have many more personnel to cover these things, for example. So, let's say, and it's not going to happen anytime soon anyway, but if I work with Red Bull, it's going to be difficult to make a massive difference to what he's doing now, unless there's a massive fight going on with Ferrari and Mercedes, and it's about the very small details.
Hopefully next year that'll be
that would be cool, no?
That's the dream, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah. No, I'm really looking forward to next year.
Yeah,
actually.
I think next year's going to be good. I think we saw how Mercedes moved towards the front towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think McLaren, Alpine, even like Aston Martin, they're good momentum at the end of the year as well. If Alfa Romeo, if you can, the performance you had at the start of the year, rediscover that kind of competitiveness, I think we're in for a good 2023.
Yeah.
I'm confident.
Yeah. The midfield battle was amazing already this year.
I was so like Abu Dhabi, I was like, they're level on points, like you and Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And then obviously Valtteri's P5 in Imola was the defining factor. So it could have been much easier because we had a lot of retirements in point positions this year. That life got a bit more complicated than it should in the end. But in the end, you can see every point counts. Yeah.
The smallest differences we made with certain calls.
Joe's point first race of the season ended up paying dividends at the end.
Monaco strategy, where we went from P11 to P9, if I have it correct. These little things all added up make a difference between P6 and P7, and that's a big one for Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, is it 12 million? I don't know.
I guess so. Yeah,
it's a lot of money. So
that's amazing. It was a good party with the team afterwards, and it's the best result ever. But what the team did this year was amazing for such a small team we are. I think a lot of things can be improved, and we are looking forward to address those points. And I've learned a lot, became a lot wiser, and yeah, and also learned a lot how to combine certain businesses, teams together, and hopefully next year that's it's going to be easier and smoother and even more successful.
Because I mean, we've sat here and spoke a lot about racing, all about racing, kind of solely. But the Max Verstappen that you know, kind of off the grid and outside of sim racing, you know what I think with Max is that Max is clearly, compared to a lot of other drivers as well, I think he's quite private. He's very real. He's very honest. Reminds me a lot of Kimi Räikkönen in that regard. They're very different personalities, but in terms of very real and true to themselves, seemingly.
Yeah.
Do you think Max is a misunderstood character? Because obviously he's top of his game, 2-time world champion.
Yeah.
But also he keeps his personal life to himself.
Yeah.
And I think in part because he keeps so much to himself, that almost people want to know more. They want to, you know, when there's like there's so many like fascinating stories that like we've spoke about today of Max as on like a human level. You know, do you think his character is misunderstood?
Well, yeah, definitely, because how I know Max is completely different than probably how the world sees him.
Yeah.
So on that aspect, yeah, I would say so. And also the reason why maybe he needs to keep his personal life together to keep it separate from the media, to make sure that he can always perform on the highest level, that he has his moments where he can pull back from the whole circus, and then and he deals it. So what we do very well in Holland is that we always speak the truth in terms of what we think.
Yeah.
Like, we're quite direct.
You're not like the British. We're just that
you
dance around the subject.
Yeah,
and
yeah. It's great to have a contract negotiation with British because they take 5 hours of chit chat, especially if you're third wheel in those conversations. Jokes, in Holland it's like 5 minutes. I want you to drive there for this money. Okay, good, signature. That's good. It's very efficient. But yeah, Max is very Dutch when it comes to his communication, and he's very direct, and I think it helps him a lot, and it helps people around him a lot, because you know exactly what he means, what he wants to say, and he's just always direct. And the messed up part, what I see in F1, is that everything is such a show that you cannot take the truth separate from the acts anymore. And I think that's where things get really confusing, where the most natural guy, the most honest guy on the grid, is probably seen as someone who's putting up a show by some driver, by the audience, or in general. And that part he's misunderstood. But the good part about him is he doesn't care. I don't think he sleeps one night less about anything what others say about him, because he will always say the same. And a couple of examples is that when I speak to him after a race, for example, or during the race weekend, and something really unique happened, and he gives a very honest opinion about the situation, I'm like, okay, that's a ballsy statement. And then I watch the news later and I see exactly that quote from him saying the same to the media. So that always confirms to me, like, okay, whatever he says in personal life, he also says to the media. So it's actually what he really thinks, which makes him, maybe almost unique on the grid at this point. And that makes it very weird as well to see what's happening, like how things can get twisted. And yes, because of his character, not everyone likes him, because it's a very specific style. But it makes him 2 times world champion already. And
I think you can look at numerous different people from different, be that teams, be that, you know, your Manchester Uniteds back in the day, your Novak Djokovic more recently. Like, I think it's not a popularity contest. You're performing at the top level. It's competition. If you're going to be in that position, you have to be uncompromising, and you have to do everything you can to try and win. And, you know, they're also 20 different human beings. And that's the thing as well. I think everyone's got a different character. Everyone's got a different way of approaching it. There's no one size fits all. You know, Senna was very different to Schumacher, who's very different to Alonso, who's very different to Hamilton, who's very different to Vettel, different to Verstappen. And that's part of what I love about the sport. And what I think opening up, you know, seeing the drivers and trying to get more of an understanding is that we do see these kind of human characters. But I also don't like the way, and this is true for Max, this is true for Lewis, this is true for every single F1 driver. I think sometimes there's a guilt from, and you know, I think we're all guilty of it to an extent of you know, not seeing the humanity in these instances where they are like, they're competing at the top of their game. And I guess obviously you understand that more than most, because, you know, when you're racing on a simulator versus racing in F1, it's still racing. You want to win just as much. I know, like, you know, when you guys DNF'd in Le Mans, like, Max was fuming, and that was a disconnect, wasn't it? Was that a disconnect or was that a crash?
It was a little bit of a crash.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but that's also typical. Like,
oh no, it's just a disconnect. So it wasn't a crash.
No, we are honest. He clipped the curb a little bit. It was very bad luck because he had to overtake someone, and it's the last two chicanes of Le Mans. He had to overtake a GTE car with the LMP. He had to go off his line, and then he hit the curb just in a wrong angle, and the car flipped around the curb, and it bottomed out in a weird way, and that sent him into the wall. So it was very unlucky, because if you do it 300 times, it wouldn't happen again like that. It was just, and you cannot prepare for something like that. Yeah. So that was very typical, actually. Not typical, but he felt so bad after that happened. Really? Yeah. And he sincerely apologized to the team, because he knows how much work everyone puts in. Yeah. And I think that hurt him quite a bit. Like that he felt like he let the team down, which in hindsight, I'm still, like we began this interview, I'm still most proud of that race weekend, of that race, because we were so good, even though we didn't end it with a win. It was just almost perfect. And if it ends like this, I could have been that guy as well, putting it in the wall like that. And it was a honest mistake that you couldn't prevent much anyway. So all good, but it was very nice to see that he blamed himself for it. And
he took responsibility, ownership, but also that's part of, I think, you kind of have to do that, but also as the team, you understand that, like you say, that could have happened to. Yeah. You've all had those experiences before. Yeah. That's just part of the game, and part of, obviously, I guess one final question. Obviously, you know, you've got your Autosport Award, best esports team. You know, like you say, big pace delta advantage at Virtual Le Mans, super competitive tournament, and you're able to, you know, perform at a top level. How do you make sure that Team Redline stays at the top? Because there's more competition than ever now.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. It's, you know, to match this year is near impossible, because what we wanted to win, we won. And that's will always be the objective. Winning will always be our number one goal.
But also you'll be the target now. Everyone's looking at Redline.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, we sign good drivers, but we educate drivers. So here and there, drivers move on, or they go to a different team, and then it's just on us to build a new superstar. That's how it is. That's how it will go. But it will get more tricky in the future, because sim racing, there are more teams involved in the esports sim racing scene now. So everyone wants the best drivers, and the ones with big budgets. Maybe some drivers will be sensitive to that and can leave. Others will prioritize to win, and they will stay with us. So hopefully. But it will be difficult. The scene is changing quickly. Every year there will be different competitions, new competitions, more prize money. The stakes go up, and we just need to find our way through it, and make sure that we represent all partners as good as we can. We take the victory as much as we can, and if something is lacking in the team, then it's up to us as management to find a solution for that. But so far we have always done that. But the baseline is good right now, and yeah, like what I said before, matching this season is going to be tough, but we'll try.
Best of luck, man. You've got the facility, you've got the personnel at the minute, and it's, mate, you should be proud of yourself, man. You built something amazing, especially like, again, knowing where this industry was not even like 10 years ago, to have this and to work with all these drivers and to work with an actual F1 team as well, man. That's like super inspiring.
Yeah, it's cool. I love it. I love what I do, and everything I do is racing, which is my biggest hobby as well. So yeah, happy where we are right now with the team. There's still a lot to achieve, still a lot to expand, and we can always do better. Yeah, and in racing, can't wait for the new season. Like we had a massive season last year with Alpha. Next year we go try it again.